Thank you so much for inviting me again to participate in this event with you guys. And Karen, thank you so much for working with our company, Vintage Wine Company. And this will actually be the fifth time that I've gotten to join Mr. Hugh Davies on a virtual wine experience. So this is Hugh Davies from Schramsberg, not even arguably the most historic sparkling wine producer in the United States,
Yes, it is.
in California. Amazing history, amazing wines, and I'm really excited that we get to share them with you. So Hugh, please take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Ben, and it's great to be with you guys at the U Club there in Lansing. I guess you're all Spartan fans. Does that make sense? Big fans of Jim Harbaugh. Do I have that right?
Oh God, that's the wrong team.
We're fans of what he's doing in Ann Arbor at the moment. Yeah.
I was going to say you can have them because we didn't. In the end, we got close with them here with the 49ers, but then close doesn't count. But no, I guess I'm just giving you a hard time. Good luck against the Wolverines. So Schramsberg is my family's winery in Napa Valley, California. I don't know if any of you may have had a chance to visit this part of the world, but we're just north of the San Francisco Bay Area, kind of the north part of the San Francisco Bay Area, Napa, Sonoma County, couple areas where wine grapes have been grown actually since the late 1800s. And this particular winery, Schramsberg, has roots that go back to 1862, actually, one of the very first wineries established. Crazy to think 1862, obviously that was in the middle of the Civil War, but there were a couple of Germans who established the first wineries in the Napa County actually during the Civil War. So I guess they weren't as preoccupied as folks on the other side of the country were about that conflict, but more interested in planting Riesling, Chasselas, Derif, Zinfandel, other varietals. In this case, up in the hills above Calistoga. So the first hillside vineyards planted in Napa County were actually planted on this old historic property. Schramm and his wife were 16 years old when they would migrate to the United States, landing in New York, coming across the ocean on a boat, having no idea, where their lives were going to lead. About 20 years after they arrived in New York, they would make their way to this specific property and establish it, obviously with the help of others, dig out caves, plant vines, and they would make still wines in that earlier era. The property retains some of the older buildings that date back to that time period. Also, the caves, vineyards have been replanted, but it's interesting from my standpoint to live here on this property that has this history going way back. My parents would come to Napa Valley in 1965, and actually it was in that year that they would revive this winery. The winery in our industry here in California, wine industry, was closed at the time of Prohibition. So that was a difficult time during the teens and through the 20s, actually. It was illegal to commercially produce alcoholic beverages. And so that wasn't good for people in the wine industry. This family, the Schramm family, would sell the property. And it was bought and sold a few times before my parents, with some partners, would acquire this old property in 1965. So I was born shortly thereafter. And have really enjoyed life. I've no complaints. I've been able to continue on with this business that had heritage going back to the 1800s, but then special for me to be able to do something that my parents would do. My parents both passed away at this stage. My dad passed away in 98 and my mom in 2008. But with a great team, we continue on with the operation, and gradually it has grown a bit, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the range of sparkling wines that we make, and beyond that, we actually do some delicious red wines as well, though we'll focus on the sparkling wines today. So my parents would come from Los Angeles. They met actually in San Francisco, and they'd both gone to college there. They had migrated from San Francisco up to Napa. They had this idea of making sparkling wine in the traditional method, using Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, which were the traditional varietals used in the Champagne region of France. They wanted to do the bottle fermentation and this traditional method. They found this old property that had these cool caves. Actually, there are 3 miles of caves. There are 2 miles of caves, about 35,000 square feet of underground storage in the hills here. Pretty exciting, pretty extensive. But they would be the first to do this style of wine in California. And so the earlier comment, kind of this historic sparkling wine producer, 55 years in, we've just done our 56th harvest. When you start out, and I think my parents' vision was to be the first to do this. You always get to take that with you, right? There's always a little pedigree that comes with being the first to take a challenge on. And it's interesting to think in 1965, there were actually only 20 active wineries in Napa County. Today, over 500. So there's been a lot of growth in our industry over these last 50 years. And up until 2020, frankly, the last 10 years were pretty good. This year, as I'm sure you can well imagine, a little more challenging. But my parents' vision was to really create, arguably a sparkling wine that would be world-class. It would rival the best made in Champagne or anywhere else in the world for that matter. If we grow super high quality fruit, and if we follow and develop really a technique, a quality technique, we'll be able to rival those great French champagnes. And so indeed that's what we've done. They would start back in the 1960s, as I indicated, the Blanc de Blanc, which will be the first wine I'll pop open. And I might want to check in with you. It sounds like some of you have maybe 2 bottles of the Mirabelle and the Mirabelle Rosé. I'm going to taste those 2, our non-vintage duo. I'll taste those towards the end. I have 5 bottles that I was going to taste through with you. So we'll start with the Blanc de Blanc, vintage dated 2017. This was the first wine that we would make going back to 1965. And we've made it every single vintage actually since that time period. Chardonnay. With Chardonnay as opposed to Pinot Noir, you get a lighter bodied varietal. You get a varietal that has exquisite natural acidity. And so this creates a really beautiful brut style, crisp, elegant, polished, refined. With that, we've had some pretty good success growing this up. And the first vintage, we made about 200 cases. 1 tank of wine, that was it, from one vineyard block up on Spring Mountain. Today, we're working with a deep range of vineyards throughout this kind of north coast of California. We'll take a look at a map here shortly, but to give you a sense for this process, we use Chardonnay, we use Pinot Noir, right, to make these wines. This particular Chardonnay only. In making still wines, typically you'll pick the fruit a little riper so that it has a little more sugar. Will create a little more alcohol during the fermentation. Making sparkling wines, we really want to capture the vibrant tart acidity of the fruit, and we pick the fruit with a little less sugar. So earlier in the season, the sparkling wine producers will commence. And so once we've made these relatively lean tart wines, lower in alcohol, we will come back. Our harvest, I should say, is kind of August, September, October. We'll come back in the spring and then craft our blends. And then to the blends, we'll add a little bit of yeast and sugar in order to go through a second fermentation in the bottle. And I'm parking myself in the cave today. Behind me are all these sparkling wine bottles, right? So if a bottle is filled in April, by May, it's become a sparkling wine. But then it wants to age for at least a couple of years. And with the styles that we're looking at today, 2 to 3 years of age in contact with the yeast is what we're doing. In some more expensive examples, we'll actually age for up to 8 years. In some crazy cases, now we're doing some things that will age for 20 or even 25 years in contact with the yeast in the bottle. But with this wine, about 2 years. And so at the end of that 2 years of aging, there's a chance for the fruit to very gently caramelize, to take on a little bit of richness and depth. Still very vibrant and crisp because of the tart nature of the fruit that we started with. And then we riddle the bottles to get the yeast that done its job to move down into the neck of the bottle. And then we'll freeze the neck. We'll extract the yeast, the pressure. Once we open the bottle, the pressure will shoot that yeast out of the bottle. And then we add a final little touch of wine and a small amount of sugar just to finish the wine, bringing a nice balance. The cork goes in, and eventually the bottles go to market. But this is now still our top seller today. where we started with doing maybe, as I said, about 200 cases. Now it's more like a 35,000 case blend, the Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc. So let me taste the glass, and I should raise a glass to all you folks. Here's to Michigan. Here's to the Spartans. May you go to the, do you have a chance to go to the NCAA football championship this year? Or is that?
I don't think we have much of a chance in that one.
Maybe Ohio State will represent the Big Ten. That's probably, seems like that's.
Hey, that's probably the way you're going to want to wish. I don't know if we have that much luck otherwise.
Yeah.
It's a rebuilding year.
I don't think Ohio State's going to get to go either now.
No, they changed the rule. They announced it today.
Oh, wow. That's ridiculous.
Now, did the Lions
Yeah.
go to the playoffs? Do you guys, the Detroit Lions, or is that part of the program where you guys are too? The Lions?
Yeah.
If you're a Lions fan, you have a habit of constantly being angry.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I know
There's a lot of disappointing sporting going on in Michigan. The basketball team is pretty damn good for Michigan State at the moment. Although we just had a game canceled yesterday for COVID. So.
Well, I'm from California, but I'll definitely pull for the Lions. I know that they're due. They are due. They're definitely due. So we'll raise our glass to the Lions.
Yeah.
This
everybody, go ahead, sir.
And I was going to say, now I don't know if I'm the only one tasting this wine, or if all of you guys have the Blanc de Blanc in the glass.
So everybody just has the Mirabelle Brut and the Rosé.
Mirabelle Brut.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna right.
This guy, crisp, green apple, citrus, our principal wine in our portfolio. And it's interesting because most producers who make sparkling wine produce non-vintage sparkling wine that you don't put the year on the bottle. At Schramsberg, mostly we produce sparkling wines that are vintage dated, like still wines. Anyhow, this particular one I'm showing you is our most popular. It's out there. This one is a 2017 vintage. So typically about 3 years old, maybe 4 years old when it's in the market. And if you like your sparkling wine to be very crisp, palate cleansing, dry, the Blanc de Blanc is a great option for you. I'll jump and we'll look at the next wine then, so that I can get to the Mirabelle. This actually slide is
May I ask you a question about the Blanc de Blanc?
Yeah.
Somebody told me once that they had something to do with the White House. That was the sparkling wine.
So, and I know you guys in Michigan, you guys really like to boat, and you like to count your boats, and then you like your boat to be really, kind of disputed once it's already done. In fact, I don't even know if you guys have figured out who's won in Michigan. We're all wanting to know so that we know. But with that said, when the next president is finally selected and is in the White House, hopefully they'll use the Schramsberg, because going back to 72, every president since then, Richard Nixon, has done at least 1 or 2, or in some cases 30 different toasts with Schramsberg in the glass. Pretty cool. Almost 100 times the wines have been, one Schramsberg or another has been used by a president to toast a leader from another country. The first one was 72, when then President Nixon from California would go to China, the first American president to ever go to China. And with Zhou Enlai, who was the Xi Jinping of that moment, they toasted with Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc. Pretty cool. As Barbara Walters would explain on the Today Show the next morning, a little known sparkling wine, the Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc, had been served. 48 years later, and we still get to tell that story. But it was a good moment, right? In the middle of the Vietnamese War, America and China on 2 different sides. They met. They wanted to bring some peaceful resolution to the conflict that existed. And how cool it would have been for my parents. I was 6, so the feeling I had at the time was somewhat mute. But for my parents to have their sparkling wine served at that moment was, as I can imagine, pretty darn cool. So that's a little bit of a Schramsberg factoid for you. The wines have been served, as I indicated, a little bit by each president since. Most recently, when the French president Macron visited the White House, they rolled out the red carpet and did a very special dinner for Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron. during the Trump administration. And so we had another nice little pop there a couple of years ago. So the second one that I'm going to try, and I'll talk a little bit about this, but let me allude to this map before I forget. If you guys are familiar with the north coast of California, San Francisco would be right down towards the bottom of that map. You can see the blue of the north part of the San Francisco Bay Area on the map. We are at the north end of Napa County, up in the hills where our winery is physically located. But as we've gotten better and better at this, it's been with vineyards that are planted very close to the bay, where you have cold water. The bay is about 60 degrees. I know it's probably not as cold as but it's pretty darn cold. And then the ocean itself is also quite cold. You don't really swim in the ocean. You don't really swim in the bay. And so that cool American influence works really well with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so as our industry has matured, as we've progressed with our sparkling wines, we've moved to
Right, my face.
and Pinot Noir. And so I'd like to give people a sense for that. Over 100 different individual blocks. Some properties we lease. There are a couple properties that we own. And then we're also working with long-term contracts with others who own properties in great locations and grow grapes for us. And so we have a deep set of vineyards, and then we'll make over 300 individual base wines every year. Imagine small tanks, large tanks.
We lost you, Hugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we can. There we go.
And then maybe
On board?
if everybody else could mute, it would be
I'm,
helpful.
yeah, I'm trying to mute everybody, so.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for stopping me. I don't know where you.
You just missed like 2 seconds. It wasn't very long.
Okay. So anyway, the last thing I said was that I've just finished with the winemakers tasting through the full range of our 2020 sparkling base wines. So imagine this process of tasting some 300 wines over the course of 6 days, very carefully, really crisp, really tart. They make your teeth chatter a little bit. Did you jump over that video? Did you want to show the video real quickly there?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, for sure.
All right, maybe that's a good moment. Check this out. This gives a little detail to the vineyard story that I was talking about.
They say you can't make a great vintage sparkling wine every year. Of course you can. Having a killer set of vineyards along California's north coast allows us to make it happen. These are all
Is that just me, or did you guys lose sound too?
I lost sound. I'm not sure. Hold on. Hold on a second. Let me.
cool coastal sites, producing some of the highest acid readings of any grapes grown in the world. How do we get this consistently delicious array of fruit? It's the Pacific Ocean. There it is. Bang! It's a game changer. Today, we're growing an exceptional range of fruit along 140 miles of the Pacific Ocean. We work in Mendocino's Anderson Valley, the Napa Carneros, the Sonoma Coast, and even in some remote sites of West Marin County. You've got the Carneros and the loamy dark soils to the south of us. There's one block there that we've replanted on our own that's nestled in next to the Hyde and Tocnady sites along the Carneros Creek.
What are you drinking right now?
The influence from the San Pablo Bay allows for really high acid retention in the Chardonnay. So then we're out in Marin County. And this area is a little less understood, I think. Now, this part of West Marin County is cold and harvest is late. Look at the Stevens Vineyard here. That's really the last vineyard we harvest. Very low yielding, very small clusters. You'll never get fruit to still wine maturity. In 2011, the Chardonnay from this vineyard only got to 16 bricks and the season was over. The leaves were falling off the vines. Heading north of Marin County, you have the vast Sonoma Coast, containing isolated pockets with great vineyards such as Kiefer, Dutton, Hawk Hill, Horseshoe Bend, Nobles. We've worked with Kiefer for 20 plus years. It's a great property, 14 acres, mostly Pinot, with a little bit of delicious Chardonnay as well. We get crisp, vibrant Chardonnay, and we love the bright red berry intensity that comes out of the Pinot Noir. Further north of the Russian River is Nobles. This is a gorgeous site. Hard to get to, very elevated. It's actually 1,100 feet above sea level, a couple ridges in from the ocean. Continuing further north, we reach the Anderson Valley, where we have established relationships with several vineyards, including Wiley and Juster. Wiley we've worked with for about 20 years. Here you are at the very northwestern end of the Anderson Valley, up on a ridge. It's flat, sun exposed when there's no fog. It's picturesque. En route back to the winery, before you hit Philo, you'll hit the Juster Vineyard. At Juster, it's Pinot Noir again. It's close to 30 acres, a site that we leased and planted along the Navarro River in 1998. We like these Anderson Valley sites for the crisp, almost orange citrus nature of the fruit. We really have a great set of vineyards that we work with. It'd be impossible to own them all or to manage them all. And each year, we try 10% new sites in order to continue probing and fine-tuning our mix. Being able to vary allows us to select the very best fruit grown and also to experiment with new sites that continue to take us further into previously underutilized but exceptional areas for growing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. We make vintage-dated sparkling wine, absolutely, every single year since our first wine. And in order to do that, we have to keep working our coastline and the full range of its vineyards.
Well, there you have it. So
You wanna
that's
go-
our vineyard
Do you
video.
want to go back? You want to go back up to the map, or do you want to go to the next
No,
slide?
you're good. You're good. I think that gives you a sense, and if nothing else, you would have an appreciation for how hard this group of winemakers up on this hill above Calistoga goes to be able to have this killer range of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir with which to make these sparkling wines. It's interesting. We're doing something that there just aren't many of us who will make this style of wine in the United States to begin with. And we have over these years we've really explored it in some depth. So it's pretty cool. Check out the Blanc Noir just briefly there on the map. I have a glass in my hand. This one is made from Pinot Noir, and so it is interesting to consider Pinot for sparkling. We're no skin contact at all, so generally people think of Pinot Noir always as a red wine, but this is in fact the white wine, right? The Blanc de Noir of the black grape. And so we will pick the Pinot again a little early in the season. We press the juice out of the skins. We leave the skins and the seeds in the press, and then ferment the juice apart from the skins. Initially, it's kind of pink, but it becomes a beautiful gold color. So this one typically is a little more lush, soft, creamy to the texture. The French refer to the masculin, right, of the Pinot Noir, as opposed to the feminin of the Chardonnay. But two brut styles, right? Very dry, but differentiated because of the fruit that we use. And I would say this one, perhaps, as it has, can be a little more expressive and full, would go with an even broader range of foods. So pretty delicious, something to consider alongside poultry and pork, where you might enjoy a glass of red Pinot Noir. So Blanc de Blanc, Blanc Noir, those are the two principal styles that we've made all these years. And the third one that's in our vintage set, the Noir I'm tasting today is a 16. So typically we age that for another year. But the last of the three that I had from our vintage set is the Brut Rosé. And so this one is also 2017. We'll go ahead and pop this guy as well. In making our rosés, including the Mirror Rosé, which some of you may have, we'll ferment some of the Pinot in contact with skins, so to give us some color to work with, but it's minimal, 3%, 5% of the overall blend would be comprised of lots where we do just a little bit of skin contact. And some of those lots of Pinot Noir that we're working with to get the color will be picked slightly riper as well, just to give us a little bit more of a red berry essence, a strawberry essence. We finish those red lots in barrels. And I should mention that we use quite a bit of barrel. I talked about earlier, but in making our sparkling wines, we do principally our juice fermentations in stainless steel tanks, temperature controlled, creating really crisp, tart, lean base wines. But we like to use some barrels to give us a little more richness and roundness, expression, and those make their way into our style. And I think help to really define our style a little bit as well. Something that not too many sparkling producers do. So here's the Schramsberg Rosé, a 17 vintage. I'll give this guy a little bit of a taste. There's a little stat sheet there that gives you the breakdown. Chardonnay as well as Pinot Noir. The Chardonnay gives the backbone. Most of the Pinot that we're using is fermented apart from skins, but then a little bit of a skin contact with small portions that make their way in to give the wine its color, but also some of the really pretty red berry essence of character that you find.
Hugh, when you say you age some of the wines in barrel, like how long do they go in new to used ratio?
The barrels are used, there are two different ways we use barrels. As I referred to barrel fermentation versus tank fermentation, that's, again, we pick the grapes in August and September, maybe into October, so in that time period. And so the juices will end up going into tanks or into barrels right at that moment. And they will ferment. Honestly, the fermentation will take place simply within a couple of weeks. You know, you've got after 2 weeks, you've got a bone dry wine. But we'll leave the wines in those tanks and barrels until the spring. So in the spring, it's when we take the wines out of the tanks and barrels to craft our blends. And then most of the aging of the wine is done in bottles, as you see behind me here.
Right.
But to make it even more confusing, we do a small portion of our overall mix, typically about 2% of these blends. With our Mirabelles, when I get to those, which are non-vintage, it can be more like 15 or 20%. Those lots are going to be aged in tanks or in barrels for honestly several years. So there's a small portion of the blending that is done with lots that are aged in oak, but also in stainless steel tank, sometimes for several years. The oldest barrel lots we have are about 10 years in barrel, which is kind of crazy. And they're fairly rich. We say oxidized. I don't want to say that in a bad sense, right? But they have these, we go after these sweet aldehydes. There's some new vocabulary for you if that's not evident. But, you know, these sweet aldehydes, these kind of decadent, fruitful character. Think of an apple. If you just cut it open, you know, you've got that kind of fresh apple character. But if you then make an apple pie, right, and you stick it, and when you bring it out of the oven, you've got that kind of warm, baked, glazed apple character. Some of those are those sweet aldehydes that I'm talking about. Maybe that helps to resonate. These three styles, Blanc de Blanc, Blanc Noir, Brut Rosé, those are the three wines we started making back in the 60s and remain really the higher volume styles in our portfolio. I'm going to switch gears and we'll focus now a bit on the two wines that it sounds like you guys all have in your glasses, the Mirabelle Brut, which I have here in my left hand, and the Mirabelle Brut Rosé here in my right hand. We started making these two bottles in about 1990. It was at that point that we wanted to try our hand at kind of the non-vintage style. And the non-vintage style or multi-vintage style, it allows us to actually work, and I alluded to that a little bit earlier, the blending of multiple years into one assemblage or into one blend, which we will then bottle with yeast and sugar, go through second fermentation, aging, riddling, disgorging, and the rest of it. And so the French do a lot of this. In fact, most of what is done in Champagne is in this multi-vintage or non-millésime, non-vintage dated sparkling category. And they talk about how that allows them to make a house style, every year, that type of thing. So with our vintage dated wines, we definitely have a house style, I would say. Our Blanc de Blanc tastes similar from one year to the next. But something interesting that you can do, and maybe allowing us to not even age the wine quite as long, is this non-vintage, where you add a some portions of older wine to the young fresh wine, and then leave it in the cellar for a little less time, and then ultimately release. But these two are about 3 years old, principally featuring the 2017 vintage. The Mirabelle Brut is a mix of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, as noted on the sheet there. The Brut typically would be about 55%. In this particular iteration, about 56% Chardonnay, 44% Pinot Noir, right? So we let the Chardonnay dominate a little bit more in terms of the percentage, but the Pinot is strong. The Pinot is the masculine style, a little stronger than the Chardonnay, and so it definitely lends its flavor to the style of wine. What I thought would be fun is to use a saber to open this bottle. So I brought a saber into the cave today, and so I'm going to do that for you guys right now. The Mirabelle Brut should also, you guys have it there. It's available around the country, both on-premise and off-premise. Was it Mary? Who is the initial presenter from the U Club?
Karen.
Or did I get that wrong?
Karen. It's
Karen,
Karen.
yeah.
Karen.
I was going to say, I empathize with you big time, although in a different way, the restaurant challenge has hurt us, right? Over 40% of our business is on premise. And so this year, so where do we find all that business that we used to do? So great to be able to do virtual tastings like this, doing other activities with the restaurants to help keep it going. Fortunately for us, we can also do more retail business. So we've been working hard to ask all those retailers, darn it, sell more of our wine, please. So anyhow, I've got the Mirabelle Brut. If you guys want to try this at home, I'd encourage you. It looks like a few of you are at home. So, your next bottle of Mirabelle, you might use a knife to try to open. I'll demonstrate the technique, and then you guys will have to, kind of put it to use on, maybe try it out in the backyard. But I'm going to do it here in the cave. The idea is that there's a seam that runs up the length of the bottle, and I have this special Nayyar saber, but honestly, just about any knife, any flat edge will do. And I will take the blade, I'll run it up the length of the bottle. I'm going to hit the neck of the bottle, and I'm going to keep on going. I'm not going to crush it. It's more like a basic swing as opposed to a home run swing. Did you guys notice the Oakland A's hat on the guy out in the vineyards back in the video? You guys see it? That was good. That was me. That was me with the A's hat. I like the Tigers, all right, but I do like it. Okay, on a count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh. Now, if it doesn't work when you do it that way, then you're going to turn it around to the other side very carefully. Okay, and we go again. 1, 2.
There we go.
So, in the ideal world, you get it when you're doing the show, right? You get it on the first try.
Right.
Literally cut right through the bottle. All right. And now I'm good to go. And I'm going to pour the glass. It's got a cool little pouring spout. If you guys try this with, say, a French bottle, it's not going to work so well. So you want to make sure that you do the trick with the bottles of Schramsberg. That way you'll be in good shape every single time.
Well said.
So cheers. So Mirabelle Brut, you guys have the Mirabelle Brut in your glass. Are you impressed? Are you enjoying it? Tasting pretty good?
Lovely.
Excellent.
Now, do you have, are some of you eating a little bit as well? I would imagine, some seasoned nuts, maybe a little charcuterie, little range of cheeses might go nicely with this. Or if you're more sophisticated, maybe some fried calamari would be good at about this time, a little lemon drizzle on the top. So Mirabelle Brut. So again, dry style, marriage of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, about 2 years of age in contact with the yeast sediment in the bottle, in a cave like I am behind me here. And away you go. This one, the most modestly priced in our lineup, typically $25, $30 a bottle, something like that, could be 35. And then the rosé, which we'll try second, just a hair more expensive usually, but can be about the same price too. And the rosé is also quite delicious. It is again Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but with the rosé a little bit more of the Pinot Noir in the blend, and with that also some of that Pinot Noir fermented in contact with skins. And so it's interesting as we make these, you know, that notion of making this full range of we call them base wines, but imagine these pieces, over 300 pieces, you know, of different lots of wine produced each year with which we craft blends. And as we make the non-vintage blends, also that notion of being able to blend in some of the older lots that we've aged purposely in tanks and barrels to give us just a little more richness and depth with these styles. So I'll go ahead and taste the Mirabelle Rosé. Now, do any of you have any special Schramsberg stories? Maybe someone's had a bottle of Schramsberg at one function or another in the past, or is this the first time that you guys have done a tasting with some of our sparkling wines?
I actually experienced Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc. God, it was a few months ago, and Ben Everline actually bought it for me. We did a wine dinner. We did a wine dinner at a place called Bird Street Social. It's up in DeWitt, and like the instant taste of it was just like, oh my God, this is fantastic.
It really is just
It was,
amazing.
yeah, just beautiful, and I'm a huge sparkling fan. That's turned into what I really believe in, and that Blanc de Blanc blew me away. Like it was, yeah. That was my first experience with that, and it was amazing.
It is pretty cool to do something that not many other producers do, right? We still live in a world here in the United States, you know, for the most part, you get into the, you know, up over $25 a bottle, and it's almost all French champagne, right? That the people are, it's got to be champagne to, you know, kind of, you know, there's a champagne is a style of wine, right? So I know it's just a sparkling wine from this place, you know, it's called Champagne in France, but they make a ton of it. And they've got a good market. What I've really enjoyed working with, you know, initially with my parents, and then, you know, since they're passing, you know, we continue on, but making these really delicious sparkling wines in a different pocket of the world. Effectively, the technique is the same. You know, each producer in Champagne has a few twists and turns that it can take, and similarly we would as well at Schramsberg. But our grapes are obviously grown here in the north coast of California, as opposed to in the kind of the northeast part of France. About an hour and a half from Paris. So I'll raise the glass of the rosé. Nice effervescence, nice cordon. These are relatively young sparkling wines, and so the effervescence definitely evident in the glass. Pretty red berry notes in the aromas of this wine. A little strawberry, a little cherry, perhaps they're reflective of the Pinot Noir that we're working with. And again, in terms of foods, I think, you know, this rosé would cover even a broader range. Typically, the you know, the Chardonnay-based styles are a little more linear. The Pinot Noir-based styles are with their fruit and body, I think can stand up to even potentially some red meat with a wine like this. Nom nom nom. So that is the Mirabelle Rosé, and that kind of gives us a little sense of our sparkling story. For those of you who might be interested, at even higher prices and made on really smaller quantities, are some of these sparklings that we'll do, or we're aging for 8 years, 10 years in the bottle, in contact with yeast. It may sound crazy unless you're really immersed into the you know, into an affinity for this style of wine. But at the high end, you know, the sparkling wines from around the world, where you might get a bottle over $100 a bottle, part of what defines them, frankly, is the fact that they've been aged for that long. And so we do make a little range. There's a J. Schram, which is our top Chardonnay brut, wine called the Schramsberg Reserve, which is our top Noir or Pinot Noir brut, and there's also a J. Schram Rosé. But as we evolved, I showed in that map how we're working with the vineyards in the coastal pockets of the North Coast, where Chardonnay and Pinot Noir today are principally grown. in the slightly more inland, upland, warmer areas, certainly in the summer, where our winery is physically located, it's Cabernet. You know, we are in a pocket of Napa Valley where honestly 90% of the fruit grown is Cabernet Sauvignon. And so when we came to realize that we had this cool old property with the history and the caves, but maybe not the best place for a Chardonnay or Pinot Noir to be grown, it was a pleasant kind of I guess surprise. I don't know if surprise right now, but realization to make that, hey, we could grow Cabernet and that would be really tasty. And so initially we started with replanting in 94. By 2001, we were bottling our first Davies Vineyards or Davies Vineyards red wine. We call it the J. Davies Estate Cabernet. By 2012, we had built a facility in St. Helena, so a separate winery where we make our red wines, a smaller facility, smaller property, no vineyards. It's actually right in town on Main Street. But there we make the red wines, and we also do tastings here as well at this stage when we can. It's been a little compromised in 2020, but we do both Cabernets and Pinot Noirs under the Davies label there in St. Helena. So it'll give you another sense for how our relatively small business has evolved over all these years. So I thank you guys for giving me a little bit of your time here on a Thursday, and I wish you all the best for the holidays to come. May the vote get sorted out and everybody be happy with the result, right? And then may 2021 be a year of great joy. I tell you, no more disease, great joy, lots of wine consumption hopefully will occur, and we'll all be happy and we'll get along too, because that'll be nice.
Hey, Hugh, do you mind if we open it up in case anybody has some questions? They can just ask you directly.
Ask me directly. Go for it. I'm happy to field any question.
Anybody, please. I'm encouraging you. This is a once in a lifetime thing for me to meet somebody like this. So.
For sure. Hugh, do you mind if I ask one question? So you had said that there's some things you're aging all the way up to 20 years. What is that? And just really briefly, like, what happens to a wine that's been aged on the lees?
It's a great question.
Between like 3, 6, 9, ongoing.
For a guy who spent his whole life, kind of sipping wine and thinking about wine, literally, the house I live in is right here on the property, and my parents brought the wine talk to the table from the time I was before I was born, and now here we keep on going. You take it for granted, but the wine, wine's pretty cool. What happens is it gradually caramelizes, it takes on a little bit of oxygen, it becomes a little richer. These wines are fresh and vibrant and young, but they're made with such tart structure that they move down the track very gracefully. And so if you can imagine, if we cull out the very best lots of the year and put them into these special little blends that are so tasty, and then they've got to have that nice strident natural acidity from the fruit as well, and then set them on an aging track that's that much longer. It's kind of like sticking you can put the pie in a microwave and zap it for 5 minutes, and it comes out and it may be cooked, but it's not it has a certain flavor profile. But then if we put it at a very low temperature and leave it there for like 3 hours and then bring it out, wow, the melding of the flavor, the nuances, the layers are so complex and interesting. It wants to still be fresh. So the trick of the trade is to make these styles that will still have this freshness and this energy and this vitality at age 20, but also have these really cool glazed, caramelized, toasted characters that seasoned characters that might be really interesting and intoxicating. And the good news for producers like us is that gradually there's been a market built for that special tier of sparkling wine, and then we sell those bottles for more, and obviously that's good for business a little bit, and we really enjoy it. So that's my long answer to that question. You'll see that with still wines as well. People like to age their Cabernets for 20 years, 30 years, and break open the special bottles for those special moments. I find myself 20 or 30 than at age 2 or 3,
Right.
but there's something rarefied and special about it that is pretty cool to behold, right? So that's what drives us.
Yeah, and I just found that over time, especially with sparkling wines, because they do have such, and your wines in particular have such amazing acidity that it just kind of holds everything in that kind of rigid, tense sense for a very long time and allows the flavors to develop all around it, which is just, it's amazing. So thank you for
We've
making
been doing this for a while, and we produce about 1 million bottles a year, and so somebody's popping a bottle somewhere all the time. And there was about today, so you can imagine, I get emails from people and pictures and Snapchats or whatever. But there's a guy sent me a picture of the '96 Blanc de Blanc that he had last night, and he's just like, it was so good, it was so good. And I thought, right now the 17, but he was drinking the 96. And the difference is there's a little bit more vanilla, there's a little more caramel, there's a little more toast, there's a little more seasoning. The creaminess to the texture is more pronounced, and kind of that tart young acidity is softened a little bit. But hey, that acidity that was there as a young wine allows that wine to age for all those years.
For sure.
Hugh, I'm going to jump in. You've described there are so many variables involved in a wine. Tell us how important is the mix of varietals in what you do versus the mix of counties where the grapes are grown?
That's a good question.
In terms of the grapes, we're principally working with 2 varietals, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, right? Those are the 2 grape varietals that we work with. Inside of that, there are different clones of Chardonnay and there are different clones of Pinot Noir. So they're not to complicate it, but and we're interested, right? We're interested in those details. So as we go to plant a vineyard, we might, and should we have enough acreage, we might do a little range of Chardonnay clones, a little range of Pinot Noir clones, so that we have different versions of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from that site, from that property, if you will. So that's important, but it's also important to have in our minds as we're really blending, as we're crafting blends, and as we seek to learn every single year. It's important for us to do many things in many variations of things. And so it allows us to, as we go to make our J. Schram blend, hey, we don't need all 300 lots. We only need the top 20, right? And now we're going to make that thing so good. And as we figure out how do you make a wine that qualifies for the J. Schram, once we've done that 50 years in a row, then as we go to replant vineyards, we keep fine tuning and improving upon our techniques based on the fact that we're going through this process over and over and over again. It's kind of a crazy career or to be in, because you're really focused on something that is very long term. We're making decisions that will impact the wines that will produce 5 years, 10 years down the road, that someone might enjoy 20 or 30 years after that, right? I mean, it's part of the process here. I can hear my parents talking about how they were able to take on this project with this winery that had this history that started long before they were alive, and they'd pass it on to others who would pass it on to someone else as well. And there's something romantic about that I think most of us who are in this business really enjoy. It makes for a good life.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Questions? Did you guys, or even specifically to the 2 wines that you might have tasted? There are different iterations upon a theme. Interesting to think we make about 15 of these brut sparkling wines every year. So you've tasted 2. We've talked about 5, but we made a range of other ones this year as well, or selling a range of others this year.
What do you think? Let's hear some comments.
Champagne's still getting everybody's head.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What are you guys eating? Does anyone win a prize for having prepared the best food to go along with the sparkling wines this evening? Any bragging rights out there?
I hope you're all eating the charcuterie tray that the U Club gave you.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Hey, I didn't get one of those, Karen.
I'm so sorry, Hugh. We'll ship it to you.
Next time. I'll order one. I have received some pizza from Chicago, I think, and some of those Kringles. I think I got some of those during COVID, I'm saying, from some folks in Wisconsin, maybe.